Hey, happy Wednesday, everybody. Got my cup of coffee for our few-minute get-together. We call it Coffee with PC. What am I drinking? I've gone on a buying spree lately, trying a lot of different things. Broke my pour-over pot, so I had to buy another one. And then in the process, I'm like, let me try this. And I heard about this coffee roaster, so I've got several. I don't even know which one this is. I think it's the Brazilian Peaberry that I bought. Actually pretty good. One of the first one was a Guatemalan, not so great. That's okay. This one is a little better. Got a couple more to try, so looking forward to that. Hope you're enjoying your morning cup of coffee or tea or whatever is your kind of pick-me-up, get you going in the morning. We spend these few minutes usually talking about a part of the scriptures, and we've been lately going through the account that Matthew writes of the life and ministry of Jesus. And we're at an interesting point. If you remember last week, we left it after the death of John the Baptist, after he fed the 5,000, Jesus sends his disciples away, sends the crowd away, and we talked about his need and his habit of finding a lonely place to pray. Well, the next part of the story is another miracle of Jesus, because what happens is his disciples got in the boat, they were instructed, and took off across the Sea of Galilee, which is really Lake Gennesaret. It's called a lot of different things, but that body of water in Galilee, the northern part of the nation of Israel. And apparently they leave in the late afternoon, and it's a rough night. There's a lot of wind, and they're fighting those kind of winds. It's not been easy sailing. And while they're off, Jesus finishes his praying, and now he needs to get to his disciples. And as you learned a long time ago, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So rather than walking around the shore of the lake to meet them on the other side, Jesus says, you know what? I'm just going to head walking right out over the surface of the lake. And so Jesus walks on water, this miracle, where he goes out into the lake to meet his disciples. Now his disciples, it's been a long time for them. They're with Jesus, and John the Baptist wasn't their cousin like he was with Jesus. Certainly they were aware of his ministry, and that had been kind of tough news, and they had a whole day of ministry with the crowds, the 5, 10, 15,000 people that followed and that they fed at the feeding of the 5,000. And now they get in a boat, and they can't just relax because of the weather. It's tough going, so they've been busy. They've been up. They've had to try to navigate this boat across the lake with the rougher weather, and in the middle of probably what would have been a tired, maybe a little sleep-deprived state, one of them looks up and sees out on the water something coming toward them. Now, if you've ever been out on the water at night, you know it can be a pretty intimidating place, especially if the weather's a little rough. The one time I went out, we had a nice big spotlight that kind of lit up the boat, but back in Jesus's day, they don't have the electricity and the lights that we would have and batteries that would operate. It's probably just dark, just really dark. Maybe some small light, but even then we don't even know. And so you see on the horizon this form, this figure coming toward you, and the disciples were rightly, the NIV says they were terrified. That's the translation of the word. So scared of this sight. In fact, they even cry, we think it's a ghost, it's a ghost, it's a ghost. Can you imagine if you're the watch person and you see it and you keep looking and there's everybody else on the boat and you say, we're in trouble, there's a ghost coming after all of this. Man, you could imagine the panic that goes across the boat with these disciples until Jesus answers. And he immediately says to them, I love that word immediately. The Gospel of John uses it a lot, but every once in a while in the other Gospels we see this word. And here we see it in Matthew's account. Jesus immediately said to them, as soon as he heard them say it's a ghost and knew they were afraid, he said, take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid. There it is. Don't be afraid. How many times in the scriptures is the message from God in the midst of our difficulty, in the midst of what should be and rightfully is a frightening situation, God's answer to us through angels, or in this case through Jesus, is do not be afraid, or do not fear. And here he says it to them, which is pretty remarkable. And I imagine they recognize his voice and know it's him at this point, and it calms them down so much that one of them, Peter, who always has something to say, he's like some scholars think maybe the oldest of the disciples, so in some way kind of a leader quality, the respect of his age, blurts out, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water, which is a remarkable request. I mean, if I'm in a boat and I'm scared because I think I've seen a ghost, only to know it's not a ghost, my first thought is, well, then let me walk out there. My first thought is, well, you need to get in here. But that's not Peter. He says, hey, if it's really you, let me come out, walking on the water to you. And Jesus says one word, the NIV translation, come. Remarkable. And so Peter gets out of the boat and walked on the water toward Jesus. Isn't that remarkable? Okay, Jesus does it. Jesus is Jesus, right? Jesus does miracles. That's kind of what we expect from Jesus, the Son of God, the Savior. He has miraculous ability. But now Peter, a regular old disciple, gets out of the boat and starts walking toward Jesus. Remarkable. What must that have felt like for Peter to step out of the boat and be able to walk? It was probably a high like you and I can't even imagine. A thrill that would be beyond all thrills until, because apparently the thrill didn't last long, until it says Peter saw the wind and he was afraid and he began to sink. Now, what did Jesus say to the disciples when they're like, oh, it's a ghost, we're in trouble? He said, do not be afraid. And that do not be afraid instruction led to Peter having the experience of walking on the water. But as soon as Peter returns to being afraid, because what did he do? He looked at the wind. He considered, if you've ever been out on a boat and it's windy, it brings waves, it brings roughness. And he looks at that and he was afraid, and it says he began to sink. And his only cry, Lord, save me. And here's that word again. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him up. And they were back in the boat and the wind died down. Remarkable story. Probably one you're familiar with. It's a well-known story, a miracle of Jesus. A couple of thoughts come to my mind. What we try to do is as we think about what Jesus taught or what Jesus did, the goal of reading the scriptures, of reading the Bible, isn't just to memorize facts. Oh, I know Jesus walked on water, and I know Peter walked on water, and I know Peter sunk because he looked at the wind. Those are facts about the story. But the point of the Bible and the record of Jesus' life and ministry, really the whole thing, but particularly here as we're talking about Jesus' life and ministry, is to say the Bible was given so that we might learn something. So what can we learn? What are a couple of lessons? Two come to my mind. There are probably more. And these aren't original with me. They're ones you may have heard before, but they are helpful for us to repeat because they're lessons that, well, if we're honest, sometimes we forget. Lesson number one is, if you want to experience the life that Jesus has for you, that he says elsewhere, the abundant life to the full, it requires you to get out of the boat. Now, it's not a literal boat. I'm not talking about let's go out fishing here in the Keys and as soon as we're offshore, let's get out of the boat because that's the life of Jesus. No, by boat, maybe we'd use the word in our phrase, your comfort zone. See, all of us in our life have places, habits, that we're just comfortable with. This is kind of, for Peter, a boat was a comfort zone for him because he was a fisherman. Peter and his brother, Andrew, James and John, they were fishermen. They were experienced being on a boat. They understood how the boat worked. They understood what it meant to be on the lake or on the Sea of Galilee. They understood how to deal with the different conditions. It's a very comfortable place for Peter. It was a normal place for him. But Jesus says to him, I want you to get out of your comfort zone. And when you get out of your comfort zone, you begin to experience the life and the blessing that he had, namely, in this case, walking on the water. Now, for us, the message is similar. We all kind of have our comfort zones. Sometimes we might be better referring to them as the ruts we let our lives get into. The habits and patterns, some of them not good, others just habits and patterns not bad. And Jesus calls us, like he called Peter, to get out of our comfort zones when we follow. To follow Jesus isn't Jesus just blesses all the things you've been doing and makes them better. No, to follow Jesus means sometimes he's going to say, like he did to Peter, come. And our response is to come, to obey. And often that response to come to him will take us out of the normal ways that we typically live our life. It will involve risk. To step out of the boat and try to walk on water, that's a risk. To follow Jesus at times, it will involve risk. I could talk about a lot of examples, but I'll just leave it on that. We just have a few minutes. One that just comes to mind is, sometimes we talk about the fact that followers of Jesus should be generous. We should be generous with our resources, and that involves risk. If you give of your resources, that's resources that you might be using elsewhere, either for the needs of your family, for retirement, whatever. But to be generous risks that. But Jesus says, test me in this. When we're generous, see if I won't provide all that you need and back in blessings. And so generosity is one way that to follow Jesus will bring us out of our comfortable place and doing things that might make us a little uncomfortable, but ultimately he promises to bless. So that's just one example. To truly follow Jesus, we have to come when he calls us to come, and that will usually take us out of our comfort zone. Secondly, notice what Peter does, and this is maybe the best lesson. When we follow Jesus, as long as our eyes are on him and we're focused on him, we're doing fine. It's when we take our eyes off him and look at the circumstances we're in that what happened to Peter happens to us. We begin to sink. Now, not literally again do we begin to sink, but if you're in a difficult spot, and life can have plenty of difficult spots, what Jesus calls us to do is, we looked at this in Matthew 6 in the Sermon on the Mount. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Another way of saying, keep your focus on Jesus and what he calls you to do and what he's told, how he's told you to live. And when you do that, when you seek that first, when that's your focus, all the circumstances around here, well, we'll be able to manage them. Doesn't mean they're going to be easy. Doesn't mean you'll always be healthy, wealthy, and wise. It might mean you might be poor, sick, and dumb. Maybe that's not the right word, but you might feel like, why am I not taken care of? Why is this situation difficult? Why am I struggling? Why am I having this physical issue? That doesn't mean it's anything less than that's normal life in this broken world. But our eyes on Jesus allow us, even in those windy and wavy conditions that want to knock us down, to be able to maintain and to stay and to live in a way that receives the abundant life that Jesus promises in spite of the circumstances. Jesus never promises that if you follow him, you'll never have any problems. He does promise to be with you through the problems and help you navigate them in ways that'll ultimately be for his glory and our good. We have to trust him in that. And Peter, as soon as he took his eyes off Jesus and started focusing on the circumstances, he begins to sink. I find that in my life. When things are rough and I'm focused on Jesus and I'm trusting him and I'm following him in that way, while circumstances are hard, I have his presence. I have that assurance that he's with me. But as soon as I begin to look at the circumstances, I forget that Jesus is there. I forget that he is Lord and he is King and he is in control. And I begin to sink beneath the pressure and the weight and the worry of the circumstances. Two good lessons that I think we need reminding of. They're not revolutionary lessons. They're just kind of Christianity 101, right? Jesus is calling us to a life that's different than what we might choose to be comfortable in. And two, to follow Jesus means to focus on him in spite of the circumstances we might find ourselves in. Just reminders, really, more than anything. Not, I've never heard that before, but just, hey, I don't know where you are in your life. I don't know if it's a good season or a bad season. I don't know if everything's going right and the sun is shining, or if everything is going wrong and the rain and the wind's coming down. Doesn't matter. In either situation, our focus is on Jesus, and we trust him to see us through those situations. That's my encouragement to you. As always, we would love to tell you more about what it means to follow Jesus, to help you understand how you can place your faith in him and receive his gift of presence. Or maybe you have a need and you just want us to pray for or with you about circumstances in your life. Our church, and we have a prayer team that does that exact thing. As always, I put little blurbs below these videos, whether on Facebook or YouTube, our website, the places where we send this Coffee with PC. If you want to get in touch, there's places to do that on there. We'd love to talk with you, pray with you, help you understand more about what it means to follow Jesus. We also talk about that on Sundays, 9 a.m., worship service right here in Key Largo. If you're in town, we'd love to have you join us as we worship together and as we together learn what it's like to navigate the uncertainty of life, the uneven seas, as we try our best to keep our eyes on Jesus and follow him. That's the beauty of having other believers together. You have that community and that support, and we find that in our church. We'd love to have you be a part of it. Well, okay, that's enough for today. I'll leave it with those. Our Bible school is this week. I think you can see the kite tail. Maybe we've got some initial decorations for our Bible school this weekend, Friday, Saturday. So got plenty to do to get ready for that. So I'm going to get back to those things and leave you with all of the stuff on your to-do list today. Hope it's a good one, and especially hope to see you maybe in worship with us soon. Take care.